Hey guys, welcome to episode 13 of the Blue Mouse Podcast. So, I've got my Jenna Rose handmade bag filled with my whips that I'm going to show you today. I don't have any acquisitions that I can think of. I don't think I've gotten anything in the mail other than maybe my knit crate yarn, but I'll do a separate video for that. So last week I did a review of Anastasia's yarn. Her company is Garden Wool and Dye Company, and this was the Cormo yarn that I had showed on the podcast. And this is the one that I had done a little bit of a review for. So I've gotten a chance to work with it this past week, and I've made a mitten. This is my first time knitting mittens, and I absolutely loved it. And I can't tell you how awesome this yarn is. I mean, it's just so soft. It feels like it has a lot of lanolin in it. And so that gives it kind of a, kind of like a lotiony feel to it, is how I would describe it. So when you're knitting with it, it kind of hydrates your skin, and instead of leaving your hands dry, your hands feel like you just put lotion on. So that's what it feels like when you kind of knit with it, and even when I'm holding it right now, I can kind of feel that texture. So this is the mitten that I made with it. And this pattern is called the Persephone Mitts by Emily Foden, who is the dyer behind Viola Yarns. So she has a book called the Knits About Winter book, and this is one of the patterns from it, and I absolutely love it. So it's got this kind of delicate lace texture on the side, but really small. So these are still going to keep me really warm, and I'm actually thinking about knitting the mitten liners that she has a pattern for in the same book so that I can keep them extra warm in the winter. But I've been really wanting to knit mittens these past 2 months maybe. It's starting to get really cold, and every time I go out to my car, I just wish I had something around my hands. And I just really thought it would be fun to knit mittens. So this is my first one. It took me about a week of really inconsistent time working on it. So I could have this done, like I could have a second one done in probably 2 days if I wanted to work straight on it instead of working on actual work. But I have other things to do. So I'll probably have, hopefully, a second finished mitten in about a week, maybe a week and a half. So we'll see. But so far, I am absolutely loving this yarn. The Cormo is so soft and warm, and I'm fairly sensitive to wool. Like, it usually can make me kind of itchy or kind of get red when I wear certain kinds, but this is not doing any of that to me. I can wear this mitten and it feels soft and warm and cozy, and I can't wait to have a finished pair. So that's the first one, and I'll give you guys an even more updated review of this yarn once I have finished both mittens and gotten some time to actually use them. But so far, I am really loving it. So for this pattern, I am using a size US 0, which is a 2mm needle, and I have my Chowgu red lace needles, which are my favorite, and I'm working them magic loop. So I think the pattern calls for a US 2, but I could not at all meet gauge with a 2. I had to go down to a 0, and even then I think I'm just a little bit larger than gauge, but it doesn't bother me. If they're a little bit too big, then I'll just knit the mitten liners so that I can wear them underneath. I think this yarn might be a little bit thinner than the fingering weight that Emily used for her pattern, and that's why I was having to go down so many needle sizes to match gauge. One of the things that I found a little bit difficult in the pattern, and I've done this in the past in my own patterns, so it's something that I'm learning is important. So when you're writing something that says knit for like 3 inches, or knit until your mitten, for example, measures 3 inches from the cuff or something like that, I find it really helpful when I'm following patterns to say, if you matched gauge, this is how many rounds or rows that would be. Again, I didn't include that at all in my early patterns. It was like you have to match gauge and knit these many rows. So it's something that I've recently learned is important, and so I'm starting to incorporate it into my new patterns. So that's something I really enjoy when I follow patterns, when it says like knit for this many inches and tells you how many rows that is if you match gauge. And I know that's an extra step. Like, I could just go to the pattern and figure out, okay, if there's 20 rounds in 4 inches, then it'll be 15 rounds in 3 inches. But I don't know, I find it a little bit faster if it just tells me in the pattern, which it doesn't in this one. Nothing against the pattern at all, it's just my own preference. But other than that, the pattern is really great. There's a couple different like stitch patterns that you have to use at the same time, which can be a little bit hard to follow, but what I did is I wrote down each of the stitch patterns and then just tallied them as I went along. So there would be a tally next to each one for every row, if that makes sense. Because you're doing different things around different markers on each needle, so it can get a little bit confusing, and I didn't memorize the pattern. I'm sure you could, it's only like a 4-row repeat, so you could, but since there were 3 stitch patterns going on, I just kind of stuck with the written pattern to help me follow through it. And then my next whip is the Barkline Shawl, which I had just started last week. And this is by Joji Locatelli. Now I'm going to have a little bit of a hard time showing it to you because it's too long for my needles and I don't have a longer cable. So this is all I have so far. I think I have maybe 2 more of the basic body repeats to go through before I work on the lace. And I'm definitely going to run out of yarn. So what I did is I threw out a call on Instagram to see if I could buy a skein off of anybody. And the first time I did that, some really kind person on Instagram sent me a skein, but it came and I figured out that it was stellina. So I don't know if you can see the sparkle at all there. But the kind that I have doesn't sparkle. So I didn't want to mix the blends, I didn't want to have a third of the shawl be sparkly and the other be regular. That was so kind of them, and I'm so grateful that they did that. But I had to put out another call, and someone else was kind enough to send me a skein that I checked this time is not stellina. So I'm waiting to get that before I do any more work, because in case it comes and it looks very different in like dye lots, so if that one's a lot darker or lighter, I want to be able to kind of blend them together by alternating skeins. So this has been on hold for about a week. I think 2 days after I filmed the last podcast, I stopped working on it and waiting for that other skein to continue. So my mom's birthday is in 2 weeks, I think. Hopefully this will be done by then. I mean, I'm really loving this pattern. It's really enjoyable to knit, very mindless and simple. It's just garter sections followed by twisted rib sections. So really easy. It's starting to get pretty slow because of the amount of stitches that I have, but it's just so beautiful that I don't even mind. So it's kind of hard to show you the close-up texture because it blows out the camera, but there you can kind of see it. It's really, really gorgeous and super cozy. The silk and cashmere content of the yarn is amazing. So for those of you who missed last week, this is an old knit crate yarn that I had. It's a Vita Lana, I believe, Dream in the colorway Night. I forget what month that came out, but I really like it. It looks really pretty knit up. Lots of variation in the blues. It's gorgeous. I think I only have 2 more sections of repeats of garter and twisted rib, and then I get to the lace border, and then we're done. It's not as quick and easy as that because the lace will definitely take some time, but it's going to be so worth it in the end because it's just gorgeous. The pattern is so well written, very easy to follow and organized. I love Joji's patterns. Like, there's a reason she is so popular. Her patterns are just gorgeous to begin with, and then very easy to follow and very mindless. Like, I don't even really have to think about it when I'm knitting. Like, I can go sit in a group of friends and knit and not get distracted or have to worry about counting or anything like that. It's very easy. All right, and then I only have 2 more whips. Not too many on the go at the moment that I'm currently working on, at least. And I will have to try and find out what this yarn is. I lost the ball band and I bought it at a yarn festival. So I'll probably have to dig back in my Instagram account and see if I can find it. But it's this really gorgeous speckled yarn. It looks perfect for spring. Just reminds me of like a bouquet of flowers. And I think I talked about this in a podcast episode, maybe in like August. It might have been earlier than that actually. But I went to a like small yarn fair, I guess. There were only about maybe 30 vendors or something like that in a local mall over the summer, I think it was. And I dragged my mom to it because I didn't want to go alone. So she was gracious enough to come with me, and she had pulled this yarn off a shelf and was really, really admiring it and said she really liked it. It was out of her normal color scheme, but she kind of wanted to venture into something new and more fun. And then she put it back and we kept going. But at one point I dropped her off she was just looking at her phone for like 15 minutes while I did a second round. And I went off and bought this yarn for her with plans to make some kind of scarf or cowl in the future. So I am making the, what is it called? The Ships and Birds or Birds and Ships cowl by Caitlin Hunter. It's one of those. I'll link it below. But it's really, really pretty. I started it this morning. I matched gauge and it's working out perfectly. So it's a unique construction for a cowl. It's going to be, I think she called it like a bandana cowl. So it kind of comes down more in the front than in the back. I think that's how it goes. So you actually start working it flat. And it starts a lot like you would start a shawl. I don't think this gives anything away in the pattern, but you start with a garter tab cast on. Then you're just working some increases, and now it kind of looks like this, which is like a mini shawl. And at some point we're going to join in the round. So that's all I'm gonna say. You'll have to buy the pattern to get the rest of it. But yeah, it has this lace detail in the middle. And then just 2 sections of garter on each side. So really you only have to purl a few stitches every other round. That's usually why I don't like working flat, because of all the purl stitches. But because these 2 giant blocks on the end here are worked in garter, you only have to do a few purl stitches on the back side of the lace. So it goes very quickly. Like I said, I started this morning and I'm already this far using fingering weight yarn. And I match gauge with the same needles that she called for, which is a US 4 3.5 millimeter. And again, my ChowGoo red lace is my needle choice always. I have now acquired like almost every size. They're my absolute favorite. They're amazing. So that concludes all of my selfish knitting. Since getting married, I've found it helps if I put work away before I go to bed. So if I work on just gift knitting or selfish knitting before I go to bed, it helps me unwind. Because if I do work knitting, which is what I used to do up until I would fall asleep, if I do that, then my brain just keeps working and I get all wound up and I end up staying up way later because I'm trying to accomplish more. But if I choose something that has no pressure to it, like all of these just for fun knits, then I don't have to worry about it. I just work until it's time to go to bed, and it helps me fall asleep easier. So no more working until really late into the night, at least on like actual work knitting, or at least that's my goal. That brings me to actually showing you what my work knitting is. I haven't shown this on the podcast yet because I had been working on all kind of the finer details of it, so I hadn't cast on until recently, till a few days ago really, because I wanted to get the math of the pattern fully written, and then I would start knitting it up to make sure that the math worked. That's going to be my new style of writing patterns now, instead of writing it as I go and then typing it up at the end. I may still do that a little bit, but for now I really have been enjoying writing up at least one size, if not all sizes, up ahead of time. And then I start knitting it to make sure that it actually works, because sometimes you can write something and it looks good on paper, and then you try and knit it and it just doesn't work out. So it is working out, which is nice. And I'm making a top-down seamless raglan brioche sweater, which I'm really excited about. This was a challenge. Brioche is something I'm still kind of new to. I love it, but it was a little bit challenging to make a sweater out of it. So this is my sweater so far. And you can kind of see that there's kind of like a diamond shape in the middle. So what I do is I start at the neck and then I increase along the raglan lines, for the sleeves. At least that's how a raglan starts, is you start in the round with the neckline if you're working top down. And then you have these raglan seams that come along your arm on each side. And so you increase on either side of that seam. So you're adding width or stitch count to the arms at the same time that you're adding stitch count to the front and the back panels. Traditionally, you have the seams like right here by your shoulders so that they come down diagonally like that, which is what I did on the back. But in the front, I shifted them over until they were like right in front of your neck. And so it goes diagonal the same way, but it starts closer to the middle. Do you see what I mean? You can see this line of increasing here starts in the middle, whereas on the back, it's all the way over here and over here. The reason for doing that is that when you're working brioche, you have these vertical lines, which look just like ribbing. But in brioche, when you increase and decrease, it changes the line of your ribbing. So when you start out going straight down, and then if you increase, you're going to start to get a diagonal line, which is what happens here. So you started going down normal, and then you increase, and it starts going down diagonally and widening because you're increasing. So that's what I did in the front, and it's functional because it adds width to the front of your sweater so that it's wide enough, but it also gives it a kind of interesting detail, like aesthetically on the front. And so what my plan is, and you can kind of start to see it, is that I work straight around just underneath the underarms, and then I'm going to have the lines go back in. So at the top of the neck, you start at a point, then you increase, you work flat, and then you decrease. So it creates this diamond on the front while not shaping the sweater, if that makes sense. So it's not going to come in tight on the hips, because while I'm decreasing to get that diamond shape at the bottom, I'm also increasing on the sides of the sweater so that the number of stitches never changes. So I hope that wasn't too confusing. It'll make a whole lot more sense when I can actually put the sweater on and show you. So I'm getting there. I have maybe another 6 inches or so on the body, and then I can bind off and do the sleeves. But I'm going to actually write up the pattern today and send it to my tech editor so that it can go to test knitters probably in about a week. So maybe if I put it on a hanger, that'll help me explain it. So, do you see these lines here? That's the diamond shaping right here. It's getting wider. And then down here, you can see that it decreases and it's coming back in. So, increase, straight, decrease. So it creates a really cool diamond shape in the front, and then the back is just plain. I didn't want to do any kind of intricate thing on the back so that when you're knitting the pattern, it gives you kind of a break. So that being said, it's very, very easy if you know how to brioche. You're only increasing in the yoke every 4th row, and you only do that a few times. You don't have to do it a lot because the gauge on this pattern is 12 stitches per 4 inches. So it goes very quickly because to get a wide width for your shoulders, you don't need that many stitches. Whereas like a fingering weight sweater knit in stockinette is gonna need a lot of stitches because usually you have like at least twice as many stitches per 4 inches. It's hopefully going to make a really cushy, cozy sweater. I can already tell that it's doing that. It hasn't been blocked, so it will definitely relax a little bit once it's been blocked, but so far, I really love it. And the yarn that I used is a friend that I met at the Our Maker Life event in July in Chicago. And his name's Jake. He runs Ken Yarn. And I don't think I have any more of the ball bands on that because I wound up all the yarn. But it's DK weight and it's super cushy. And we're putting together kits for this pattern when it comes out. And they have a very special meaning to them. So there's 3 different kits that are going to be available. And each of them has a very special meaning behind it and inspiration for the color that I cannot wait to share more about soon. So again, I will be calling for testers probably about a week. Whenever my tech editor can get it back to me, I will be sending it out for testing. And one more thing that I found challenging but felt so good and rewarding once it was figured out was how to do short rows in brioche, which I've never done before. Short rows are just something that recently clicked for me. I'll be doing tutorials and explanations on my channel soon because I want to kind of demystify it for people. The pretty challenging thing about this was doing short rows in brioche really confused me, but I think I've got it figured out. You can tell that the back is higher up here than in the front, which is nice. It's exactly what I wanted. And it's actually a lot easier than I thought it would be. I'll be doing a tutorial on it as well. I want one to go with the pattern, and then I also just kind of want to throw one out to you guys in case you would ever need to do short rows in brioche. So I did a German short row technique, and it really is very similar to how normal German short rows are. The only thing that's really that different is that you have to work more rows because in brioche, you have to work 2 passes on a row for it to equal 1 actual row. So you have to work twice as many rows to get the depth you want, if that makes sense. I will be sharing more about that soon. I'm really excited about it. It's something that has been super challenging, but really rewarding because I've been able to figure it out, and that's really exciting to me. So I can't wait to share more about this, hopefully in the next couple podcasts. And I have a sign up for my test knitting newsletter if you'd like to be notified about testing opportunities. I'll have that linked in the description for you to sign up if you want. I'll be making some tutorials to go with it, so it won't be that hard. Trust me, it's actually very, very simple and straightforward if you know how to do brioche. Even if you don't, if you're willing to learn, I feel like you could probably do it. So that's pretty much everything I had to share today. Those are all my whips, and there aren't that many of them, but I kind of like having just a few to work on, one thing for work and a few fun things that I can work on in between when I need a break. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. One quick plug before I go. Anastasia, who has the Garden Wool and Dye Company, which is the yarn that I use to make those mittens, has just started something on her website called a yarn swap. So you take any yarn that is in your stash that you know you're not going to use, you post some pictures of it. This is a bin of the yarn that I've put up on there. And you can swap with different people, and other people post pictures, and you can ask them if they would like to trade, or someone who it doesn't already have something listed, can comment and tell you that they have something you might like. It's just a really cool tool, I feel like, to get rid of things in your stash that will not be used and to hopefully be able to swap for something that you will use. So I found it to be really fun, and I'm hopefully going to do a couple swaps this week. So yeah, just a quick plug. She didn't ask me to say that, but I just thought it was really cool that she kind of put that into her website. So I'll link it below in the description as well as the show notes. And thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next episode. Bye.